Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Book Club. Today, we are covering an author who I obsess over, can't get enough of, the queen herself, Eve Babitz. She started as a magazine writer and then later became known for her semi-fictionalized memoirs. She's described as Dirty Joan Didion. And if you know me, you know how much I love Joan Didion. And I love things that are dirty. A little bit on Sex and Rage. Sex and Rage was originally published in 1979. It was reissued in 2017, around the time of the Babitz Renaissance happening online. The New York Review of Books and Counterpoint Press began reissuing her work, and a whole new generation of readers began obsessing over her. Sex and Rage is about a young woman finding her way amongst a crowd of various characters as she crosses between the planets of LA and New York. The protagonist, Jacaranda, named after the cotton candy flower, spends her nights, quote, in those mansions above Hollywood and Beverly Hills where ambulances once lost their way and where handsome devils sat around on their amps trying to outdo each other in songs, blondes, and downers. The book will be available on Library Science. So without further ado, let's bring on Gracie. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, hi.
I'm freaking out. I miss you. How are you?
Match the cover on purpose, is that?
I'm so excited for
Me
this.
too, me too, me too.
We're both LA girlies.
I know, let's talk about it.
What is your relationship to Babitz? Like, had you read Eve Babitz before this? Was this the first time?
I hadn't, and it felt cosmic that you texted me about this when you did, because I had just like weeks before bought the book and had it sitting in my room. But I knew her to be a California girl, and I knew of her kind of like complicated relationship with Joan. And
Yes.
and so I was really thrilled.
I feel like people our age are discovering her for the first time now, and her voice still resonates. What do you think it is about her voice, reading her for the first time recently, that people are like still attracted to today?
The danger of growing up is timeless. So I completely understand why people are still drawn to her.
I also think there's like a beauty to the way that she writes, where Joan Didion might have more perspective. Eve is not writing with perspective. And I find that to be quite comforting. She's figuring it out in real time.
Many times I felt my kind of caretaker instincts like triggered by her stories and wanting to like reach into the book and like clear the room of drugs and alcohol or whatever. I was like, but what I love about her is that it feels like she infuses like satire in all of these kind of tougher, complicated moments that are inevitable growing up, regardless of, geographically where you might be.
There's a quote from a biography about Eve Babitz by Lily Analik, that she says, on her late success, Eve said, "It used to be only men who liked me. Now it's only girls."
Yeah, I mean, that's the dream. That quote, her quote alone, that's the dream.
What do you think fuels our generation's interest or romanticization of the times before us?
I personally think maybe we all just crave more mystery. Inherently, there's something sexier about mystery, but it's not like people from decades past weren't also riddled with their like uncool qualities. So I think it's funny, but I do think it's got to be the fact that everything is plastered everywhere and you kind of can't avoid that now.
Yeah, I found myself asking throughout the book the groups of people she's surrounded with, like, who would they be now? Like, would they be the people who have social media? Would they be posting about it?
I don't know if it's because I feel like I've been in some of the rooms that she describes, or kind of I feel like I'd been in Max's apartment, or like I feel like I have a sense of the barge, and like that feels kind of frozen in time to me as well.
Jacaranda has a non-committal sort of who-me approach to the world. She kind of floats between people and places. She's a lot of things: an ingenue, a hustler, a hedonist, and a hanger-on, but she's also an artist, a writer, a surfer, a bohemian. I feel this is true for a lot of protagonists, particularly in writing today. But did you find this character charming or insufferable, or both?
Hardcore both. And also part of what makes her charming is also what makes her insufferable. But she's a very interesting character because she's got this kind of unique independence about her that is so appealing. But also I feel like it's that same independence that hurts people kind of in her wake, and that makes people feel maybe forgotten or undervalued, and that sucks. I think she is like all young people growing up, where you're kind of trying to avoid asking yourself the tough questions of like, is this for me?
Mhm.
How to go about navigating like environments where you're trying to live up to somebody else's expectations of like what the definition of a good time is. Navigating that is charming and insufferable.
Yes, yeah. And
Everyone,
yes,
you
and
know,
I think that the parts of her that I found insufferable were the parts of me that I also am not a fan of. Like it forced me
100%.
to look
Yeah,
at the parts when I would hear kind of her inner monologue. I'd be like, I hate this, knowing
yeah.
that it's the parts of me that I also struggle with and are probably also true for me. And I also think like being a young person who's thrown into these complex social dynamics, you haven't fully developed who you are in your opinion. So watching her kind of how easily she can mingle into these and like seamlessly sort of just blend into these new situations she's in is something I think very specific for young people, young women who are put into these dynamics with people who are older than them and maybe have already figured out.
I was going to say the age gap is like a huge
Yeah.
kind of flag of some color. I always have kind of question marks around, obviously it's a generalization and it depends on the situation, but I tend to feel like some kind of pause internally whenever there is a large gap, because it always makes me wonder about the older people,
I remember being empowered by being around older people when
Yeah.
I was younger and at times feeling empowered and at times feeling taken advantage of and like both
Exactly.
things existed. And
Yeah.
the older I get, the more I start to question exactly why I was in those
Yeah,
situations.
me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Also,
Mhm.
to not have people who are consistent to lean back on. Like if you're not a reliable person, which she really wasn't, it
Yeah.
also makes it hard for people to like stick around and be there for you in those moments. And you even kind of like see her relationship with her sister kind of teeter, and her
Yeah.
sister will disappear for pages and pages and pages and pages, and it's like you wish so badly that you could be like, call her,
Yes.
go
Yes.
to her.
Yeah.
And so I also found myself sympathizing with that character.
Seeing kind of how she rejects honest feedback, like her sister is really the only one looking out for her and approaching her with her best interest in mind. And that is met by Jacaranda with a kind of like distance because I don't think she was ready to receive that kind of care
No,
as she was going through this.
no,
Um,
and also that we've seen that, like
yeah.
that's a thing. People reject
Oh yeah.
caution when they're excited sometimes. And I think what was so devastating about this book is that it feels like you're watching her both discover herself and kind of like you're watching the light drain. It's
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah. And I think like to your point, their individual identities tended to be muddied by the social life they led. How can you exist as an independent artist and in these social dynamics that might sort of overshadow or especially in Jacaranda's case, like kind of take over.
Yeah, like influence her artistic direction. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like now more than ever, it's this really kind of strange time where like career and socialization are kind of grouped, particularly in I can speak to like being a writer and a musician only, but like I assume it's true for everyone, in all these different pockets of this industry, all industries, but this one in particular. It's like I feel like they're contradicting spaces for me, because my craft like both relies on people and also heavily relies on like real hefty alone time. But it's like I write about my experiences with people that I'm involved in any capacity, but I also sometimes like have written some of my favorite songs about people that I've like truly brushed shoulders with and then been able, like in a room, you know, that I didn't want to be in anyway. And then that has led, you know, informed my writing in some capacity. I do think though that it's so true for some people that they, you know, some people really enjoy the entanglement of the two. How do you feel about it?
There's very few people that I can think of who can have their artistic pursuit without being on some kind of a barge. But I agree. I think I do my best work when I've had time to introspect, and I'm not introspecting when I'm connecting with people, but I won't have anything like it's like I have to kind of go fill up my creative engine in some way and then like go be by myself to digest it all and turn it into something. With Jacaranda, she's not giving herself breathing room. She's going
No.
from like the next to the next to the
Yeah,
next.
and it feels like you're moving through quicksand a little bit with her, and yet in some kind of like time travel machine, because the way that it stretches is like very accurate, I assume, to that of being kind of intoxicated for years straight. It's hard to watch in real life, and it's hard to sit and read about because
She talks about feeling concerned that people will treat her differently if there's an awareness around her artistic expression as a writer. As a writer yourself, do you ever feel an awareness from other people that experiences could end up in your case, like on a record or a song?
of course. It really comes with the territory if you're involved with somebody who writes, I think, to an extent. But what you wish you could defend or offer precursors about is like the percentage of what is me and what is me loving to write. And like any other person or artist in any lane, it's like your life experiences inform what you create, but it doesn't mean that like, you know, 100% of all the lyrics in one song are about one person. I'm laughing always when I'm writing songs because of what isn't true about what happened in my life that I get to say did. You know what I mean?
Do you ever find that fiction is the most sufficient tool in retelling a story?
Short answer, yes,
Okay.
because I think being able to like rework and reimagine conversations or like, you know, like different intimacies or like to capture loss through characters can
Yeah.
know if it's because you get to manipulate the situation perfectly.
We all have those moments where you have an interaction with someone and then you go home and you're like lying in bed and you're like, that's what I should have said.
Every day of my life.
Every day of my life. So to have an artistic outlet for those things
No, exactly.
is,
Exactly.
I think, so wonderful, particularly in, you know, when we're talking about young women in situations where maybe they don't feel like they have a voice. So that's like, I respect Eve Babbitt so much, and even Joe Diddy. And like, I didn't know when I read Play It As It Lays that most of it was true, either for herself or people in her life that she knew. When I think about the authors that I've been very drawn to, they've all been pretty autobiographical,
Yeah.
even if fictionalized a little bit. And knowing that, it's really hard to separate the artist from the art.
Yeah.
As an artist who also creates art that is autobiographical to some degree, is there a fear that comes up around letting people know you so intimately?
I think quieting that fear is a real practice that when I'm actually writing, when I'm completely alone, thinking about like, oh shit, you know, how will this translate? I also go to writing when I want to laugh something off, and I feel like the album that I just finished it feels dramatic in the funny ways, and so I feel like I'm, you know, at this stage kind of trying to surrender to everybody else's interpretation of like knowing me intimately, because you know I can't tell all of these people what percentage of a song is actually directly me and what is a character that I'm lucky enough to kind of like create.
I also appreciate it so much when artists don't explicitly say what something is about, because there are so
Me too.
many songs that I've formed such personal relationships to that if I were to find out were about a specific person or even a different relationship dynamic than the one
Mhm.
that I assigned it to, it would like no longer feel like it was mine
Yeah,
anymore.
I
So I
know.
think giving that space, and I've spoken about this a bit on the book club as well, like the more specific I believe you can get in your art, the more people connect to it, which
I
is
agree. I agree completely. You wish people would never ask you, like, what is this about? And you always want to be
yeah.
like, well, listen to it or read it, and figure it out and let it be yours.
You let it be yours. There's this insanely famous photo of Eve where she's naked playing chess with Marcel Duchamp. And it's by the photographer Julian Wasser, who like took that famous photo of Joan Didion standing outside, holding a cigarette, like with the stingray. But she brings this image, which is a real image from her real life, into fiction when Jacaranda sees the photograph and thinks to herself that she would have been an idiot to spend all her time around artists and not see this picture.
Mhm.
Um, what did you think about Babbitt's blending her own reality into her fiction? And, like you said, you do the same thing where you dance the line between your art and your life.
It makes me just question, how she feels about everything that she did reference from her life at this time, that photograph included. It's kind of like how much of this is something that you're smiling looking back on, and how much of this hurts now. If you're intoxicated,
Yeah.
like, what did I do? What did people see? How do people know me differently now? And it's one of the reasons I appreciated kind of the her tone about growing up in this time.
It's also like it's okay to change your mind about the way that something feels. Like we said, being in those situations could have felt empowering in the moment. And then you can change your mind and realize that you felt like you were being taken advantage of when you get more perspective. So shifting a little, Babitz is often regarded for not playing victim to the boys' club that was Hollywood in her time. Still, it's well documented that it was difficult for people to take her writing seriously because she was a beautiful young woman producing provocative art, like the photo. Unfortunately, like this is a story that is still actively being told today. In your world, in music or in art in general, does it ever feel like you're fighting the same uphill battle?
The music industry has a reputation. I think whispers don't come from nothing,
Yeah.
and people have been harmed. And in the last 5 or 6 years since the Me Too and Time's Up movements, I think men have been put on notice in a different way. And I have personally been so lucky to work with really great people at the label and really great producers, that I don't take that for granted, because as women, the truth is that regardless of the industry, it's like we're all aware that this is something we have to be hyper vigilant to. And also, this is like the first time in history that, information, technology, truth, and harm are all converging in a way that is spreadable
Completely.
and doesn't require permission.
Like what had to happen to finally get to the point of Me Too is so horrendous. And at the same time, I feel so fortunate to have grown up and seen that happen and understand and know that women could speak up.
Yeah,
And that there's also a general understanding, we hope from most people, or a fear in men that they will,
yeah.
and that they aren't just
And
saved.
just, yeah, to know as well for them that 0% of it is acceptable, and it's not how you do business. It's just not how you do business. So I feel really, it's one of the reasons that I am grateful for the internet, like that kind of reach.
The fact that the internet has given women particularly, or anyone who has been a victim of this kind of behavior, that they have a platform and people who will listen, and that they can't be controlled, is like, I think that alone, that evolution has led to positive changes.
Yes, and I think that the bravery that the women before us have shown to get us to this place has also allowed our generation to, ask for more. And
So when Jacaranda lands in New York at the artist hub Elaine's, she alludes to the difficulty of pulling off the effortlessly cool it girl in this city, where it came more naturally to her in LA. Since we are both born and raised in LA, then we both lived in New York. What's your relationship with LA versus New York like?
I love New York. What I feel about New York is that it is both the most exciting place to be and the loneliest place to be. And I love that to be true about this city, because anytime I've been here and I have felt like soul crushingly lonely, I just go on a walk and I'm seeing people.
Yes.
And I don't need to say a word, but I'm around other human beings. Whereas in LA, I naturally isolate and I live
Oh, yeah.
not near all the young people. And I am, I like don't go out, as you
Yeah.
know. I don't.
It takes such an active effort in LA to be
It
around
does.
people.
And I just resent it because, and it's a choice.
There's things so specific to New York, like I had never had the experience of crying in public, like on the subway
Yeah.
before.
Oh my God. And
How did
it's a clearly daily practice,
it's
you know what I mean?
and it's so healing and incredible to go like like my pain is being acknowledged, but no one's trying to fix it or do anything about it. I'm not alone, but I do feel lonely. Like there's all these layers that I think are so interesting that happen in the way that you can exist alone in New York, even like going to eat by yourself. Whereas I feel like in LA, I would be so hesitant to go eat a meal by myself. People would be like, "Are you okay? What's
You
wrong?"
should see me. Yeah, you should see me in LA. It's always that. But no, I think yes, because and because of all those things you just said, what I find the like stark difference, and maybe this is just where I'm at in my life, but to me, New York is generative and LA is not generative. I live in Venice now, and so
Yeah.
I, felt like I kind of was relating to Jack Rando and all these funny little.
No, I loved imagined you like you were reading it.
Yeah. No, I
It,
literally, I sent you a picture. But I do find the thing about LA to be so wonderful is access to the water on like a deeper level, some spiritual level or something. I find
yes.
myself to be really grounded by water.
It does ground you, and I think like being away from it, you forget. And the
Yeah.
sunshine as well. But I saw a really funny interview with Chloe Sevigny talking about LA. And
A
the
video
weather
interview.
is manipulative.
Yeah.
And she's like, that's actually true because
It is.
waking up and having a bad day in LA when the sun is just like in your face. What's so interesting about Jacaranda is she goes from LA where a lot of people associate this like healthy lifestyle. She goes from being very unhealthy in LA because it's what she's used to and maybe there's no cause for change. And
Yeah.
then she goes to New York and is the healthiest she's been
Yeah.
because she's found this new inspiration. And, like Jacaranda, do you find that your art is impacted based off of where you are geographically?
A million%. And it's one of the reasons it's both like it's occasionally a frustration about how much traveling is involved in what I'm lucky enough to do. And also it's a really cool thing. Two things can be true at once because I find myself like, I've been in the city now for just a couple days this trip and I've written so much
Mm.
and it sounds and feels different than what I was writing when I was in LA last week.
Yeah.
And I find that that's true on tour. It's like everything informs
Yeah.
everything informs everything. So short answer, yes. Jack Randa or Eve wrote about this, the people walking everywhere, the way that like the light would hit the buildings, like the park, but that's also like it's completely different than the kind of nature that the environment of LA. And I liked that being in this city inspired
Yeah.
clearer minded thinking for her because I relate to that heavily.
Okay, last two fun questions that I ask everyone.
Yes.
What's a book you love to recommend or one that you've gifted the most?
Have I told you Risking Everything, the poetry
Oh,
anthology? Okay. I feel like I've given that book to everyone, but I'll send
okay.
it to you today. It's an anthology, so it's all these different poets thinking about this conversation, thinking about the fact that we were reading like semi-autobiographical. It's like so much of the poetry that I read, I feel like has had such a major influence on the kind of books that I love as well, because there's just something that's so intimate about
Oh yeah.
all of the poems, particularly in Risking Everything. It's like a collection about or anthology about like every kind of human relationship, grief and love and loss and all of it. It's really devastating. So that's my answer.
And then anything you're reading right now?
Yes. It's called The Best American Essays, but that's what I'm reading during the day right now. And then I'm reading this book called Enchantment, which is by Catherine May. I've been finding like recently I've had a daytime and a nighttime read.
I love that you do this. You're
Thank
the
you for
best.
doing this. I'm very
Always
excited.
and forever. Okay, bye. Mwah.